There was once a time when our morals, our societal understanding of right and wrong, based on natural law, made right and wrong easy to recognize, which encouraged us to fight for, in other words, protest for, our liberty and for the liberty of others. This is how we abolished slavery, how we ended segregation, how we obtained political equality for women. A moral people actually need less governmental interference in their lives because a society that recognizes natural law also recognizes what is naturally right and wrong, just because it is obvious. In such a society, most people voluntarily and subconsciously operate within norms that disallow violence, theft, and the like, and take responsibility for their actions. But when protests turn to the violence and destruction once associated instead with riots, and the perpetrators are not held accountable, this is evidence that norms have shifted. And when the line of right and wrong is no longer an obvious one to the vast majority of those within a society, and what is right for you may be wrong for me and vice versa, this moral relativism allows each and every person to accuse the next of violating their own personal and immovable morality, a morality they have simply constructed out of thin air. And when you have 150 million people, each trying to hold everyone else to a standard only the single individual understands, there can be no peace. And Hobbes looks like he is in the right again. Without a strong government preserving order, there is a risk of anarchy, chaos, rioting, looting, violence, and death. This moral relativism we have all become so enamored with, my truth versus your truth, what is right for me versus what is right for you. This morality, which is not based on natural law, and it's not based on some immutable truths and reality, but is instead based on feelings, this type of moral relativism may seem like freedom because we all have the freedom to choose our truth and to choose right and wrong, but it isn't. It is just another way the obvious has been turned into the obscene, with each person's truth differing from every other person's personal truth. It is impossible to live at peace with each other. And this does require a standard to be set. And who has the authority to set that standard? Who has the power to enforce it? A very powerful government. A government with a monopoly on force. Hobbesian authoritarianism is the most logical conclusion to this supposed rampant freedom of ever-changing truths. In fact, this can be seen as a rational argument for increasing restrictions on the Second Amendment. Yet this is also the argument that makes such desire an obscene one, because we have a people willing to hand over not just their rights, but their own power to the government, with the hope the government will use that power to protect the good people from the bad people. But gun laws do the exact opposite, as they empower the bad people and punish the good people. Because criminals, by definition, are not the ones who will adjust their behavior to align with a new law. Then the argument becomes that we just haven't given government enough power yet. In this scenario, we must empower the government to search every person, every car, every home, and confiscate every weapon. And we must also allow them the power to shut down manufacturers and distributors. Then the good people will be protected from the plans of the bad people. Unless the bad people are government, who now has a monopoly on force and a monopoly on firearms, and nothing to stand in their way from using said force and firearms against their own people, as Assad did in Syria in 2011 when he sent his army door to door to shoot and kill residents, men, women, and children in opposition stronghold cities. Again, I should just write another book on this one topic, but Americans like to say, but that would never happen here. And again, they are probably right, but only because we have the Second Amendment and have embraced the right to keep and bear arms and thus have the largest civilian army in the world. If they can come after the firearms incrementally, though, which is what they've been trying to do over time, or maybe even more quickly through, unexpected force and completely disarm the citizenry, well then, all bets are off. And this doesn't even touch on the fact that criminals, even without firearms, will find a way to perpetrate violence against good people. They can use cars, they can use knives, they can use machetes, they can use alcohol and Molotov cocktails. There's a never-ending list of how violent criminal people who are the bad guys are creative and innovative in finding ways to kill and take out the good guys. But I digress. This is the same immoral argument used to justify the use of government force against its own subjects, citizens, during a pandemic. Every mandate and arrest and loss of job was for the people's safety, for the collective good. But it is even worse than that. Not only is the average American today willing to give up a lot of freedom and several rights in exchange for a feeling of safety, but they are willing to give up their freedom in exchange for a very misplaced feeling of virtue or moral superiority. And so now we're going to kind of go back to the discussion of individual liberties and rights connected with that concept of individualism. There is another part to the individualism definition, and that is, quote, the pursuit of individual rather than common or collective interests. Egoism, end quote. Those who oppose individual liberty call it selfish to pursue one's own self-interest instead of working together to seek common or collective interests. Those who oppose individual liberty necessarily believe if you disagree with them, your interests are inherently in opposition to their own. The person advocating instead for the collective good thus believes they know what is best for the collective. They know better what will make you happy than you do. Although this is a false belief rooted in a false sense of moral superiority, as the freedom that provides me with the opportunity to pursue my interests is the same freedom that allows you to pursue your interests. Perhaps I am just willing to take responsibility for my choices where you want to make me responsible for your choices. This understanding undermines liberty because all liberties, all freedoms, all rights, by definition and reasoning, belong to the individual, never to the collective. And those looking to an all-powerful, absolute authority to secure their safety are the same people pushing the idea we live and want to live in a democracy. Peace only comes when one side in a conflict completely submits to the other side, which is why those who are denying natural law and replacing it with whatever feels right also feel compelled not to secure their own liberty, but to force those who still see natural law as superior to man-made law to submit to an absolutist state. So, be very, very wary of all the voices crying out about threats to our democracy. And you're going to find these people in both major political parties, in leadership in both parties, the rank and file in both parties. You will find them in the media, everywhere in the media, from mainstream or legacy outlets to the newer so-called conservative or impartial media sources to even individual social media influencers. Be very wary. Now that the democracy narrative is coming from everyone who has a platform from which to speak, with no pushback whatsoever from any influential voice, I am very suspicious why everyone needs to be manipulated into believing we live in a democracy and we want to live in a democracy. You should be suspicious too, because it means no matter who wins elections, tyranny is coming. Everyone in power is on board with it. They just hope their team is the ones ruling over us.